Ever wonder how some people or companies just seem to, I don't know, really sell us on
It's like
stuff?
they've got this secret playbook.
Yeah. And
Well,
today we're cracking that playbook wide open as we dive into, you guessed it, influence. The Psychology of Persuasion by the one and only Robert Cialdini.
a classic for a reason.
You've given us a ton of excerpts from it, so ready to decode the secrets of persuasion.
Absolutely. Cialdini's work really gets into those, well, he calls them weapons of influence. Those subtle tactics that are used to nudge us towards saying yes.
Weapons of influence. Okay, now I'm picturing like, a James Bond villain with a mind control device.
Huh, it's not quite that dramatic. But these psychological principles, they're powerful stuff. They're kind of like, think of them as mental shortcuts.
Mental shortcuts. Okay, I'm listening.
So we've evolved to use these shortcuts to help us make quick decisions in a world that's just overflowing with information. The catch is,
Let me guess, those shortcuts can be used against us.
bingo,
Yeah.
we can be influenced even when we don't realize it. And you don't even need to be a supervillain to do it.
Okay, so less about malicious intent, more about just understanding how these tactics actually work.
Exactly. To illustrate, think about mother turkeys.
Mother turkeys. All right, where are we going with this?
They have this instinct, a fixed action pattern, to care for their young chicks when they hear a specific cheep cheep sound.
Okay, that makes sense. Maternal instincts, right?
Right. But here's the thing. A scientist actually discovered that these mother turkeys would respond to a stuffed polecat.
Hold on, a polecat? Like a weasel?
Yeah, basically. If it made that same cheep cheep sound, they fell for it.
Wait, seriously, the turkeys were fooled by a fake-out weasel.
That's hilarious. But also kind of creepy when you think about it. Are we really that easily manipulated?
Well, we all have our own cheep cheep triggers,
Yeah.
those ingrained patterns that make us react without, overthinking things. Ever notice how persuasive a simple word like because can be?
Because you're really going to make me overthink because now, aren't you? How can because be so persuasive? It's everywhere.
Right. So researchers did this study, and people asking to cut in line at a copy machine were way more likely to get away with it if they just offered any reason at all.
Really? Any reason at all?
Yep. Even something obvious like, because I need to make copies, worked like a charm.
Wow. So it's almost like our brains hear because and they just shut down, assume there's a good reason. That's wild.
It shows how we're wired to respond to these little cues. And Cialdini says that compliance professionals, like salespeople, marketers, they understand these triggers and they use them.
Okay, starting to feel a little vulnerable here, knowing all these tactics are out there.
Hmm.
Can you give me an example, like a real-world weapon of influence in action?
Sure. Let's talk about reciprocation.
Reciprocation, like returning the favor.
Exactly. We feel obligated to return favors even if we didn't ask for them in the first place.
It's true. I hate feeling like I owe someone something.
Right. It's a strong social norm, but it can definitely be, let's say, utilized. Think about those free samples at the grocery store.
Oh, don't even get me started. I am powerless against a free sample.
Even if you weren't planning on buying that new fancy cheese, taking a sample can create this sense of obligation to purchase.
Yeah.
Even just a little something.
It's so true. And I always end up with something I don't even need. It's like that feeling of, I don't know, almost like indebtedness, even
Yeah.
if you didn't want the thing in the first place.
Exactly. And there's this incredible story. A German soldier, World War I. He's captured, right? And he accepts this piece of bread from an enemy soldier.
Okay.
That small act of kindness
Oh, yeah.
created such a strong sense of indebtedness in this soldier that he couldn't help himself to harm that other soldier, ever.
Wow, that's actually really powerful. And all from just a piece of bread. So we've got these weapons like reciprocation, but there are more, right?
Yeah.
What about commitment and consistency?
Ah, yes, big one.
Because once I'm committed to something, I'm pretty stubborn. I like to see it through, you know?
There you go. Cialdini argues that once we've committed to something, especially publicly, we feel pressure to stay consistent with that commitment. Even if later we're like, what did I sign up for?
Ugh, the worst. Makes total sense, though. We like to seem consistent in our beliefs, our actions. It's all about image, right?
Right. Think about toy companies. It's holiday season, they're advertising some must-have toy like crazy.
Creating a frenzy.
Exactly. And then, sold out everywhere.
Yeah?
But don't worry, there's always a substitute.
Ugh, I've fallen for that. And then what happens?
After the holidays, magically, those sold-out toys back on the shelves. And the
Well,
kids are
yeah.
like, but you promised.
Those sneaky toy companies. Playing on the parents and the kids. So, commitment and consistency. Brutal but effective. You mentioned public commitments make this even stronger. How so?
It all goes back to our self-image. Public commitments, they add this external pressure to remain consistent because we want to be seen as, reliable, true to our word.
So it's not just about us, it's about how others see us.
Cialdini uses the example of American POWs during the Korean War. The Chinese would get these POWs to make these small, seemingly insignificant pro-communist statements, and then they'd publicize them within the camp.
And by making those statements public, even if they were meaningless at first, the POWs felt pressure to, start actually believing what they were saying.
It's subtle, but by getting them to make those initial public commitments, it opened the door to influence their attitudes over time.
That's both brilliant and kind of scary. So we've got reciprocation, we've got commitment. What about social proof? That whole everybody's doing it thing.
Oh, social proof is huge, especially when we're not sure what to do. Cialdini talks about this really tragic case, Catherine Genovese.
Wasn't she murdered? And there were a bunch of witnesses who didn't do anything.
Exactly. And it's a really chilling example of something called bystander apathy.
Bystander apathy.
Yeah, so when we're not sure how to act, we look to others, right? And in this case, everyone kind of assumed that someone else must have already called the police. So the presence of all these other witnesses actually made it less likely that anyone would help.
Because everyone assumed someone else was taking care of it. That's terrifying. Knowing this, is there a way to prevent ourselves from falling into that bystander apathy trap?
Awareness is a good first step. But if you ever need help, be direct. Like single someone out, tell them what you need, make it clear it's an emergency.
So don't be afraid to point and be like, you, call 911.
Exactly. Being direct, that can break through that diffusion of responsibility.
Wow, okay. This is all such good info. It's like, I'm seeing the world differently now. I'm going to start noticing this stuff everywhere.
That's the point. Cialdini wants us to understand these principles so we could be, more informed.
So we're not just blindly following these invisible scripts, right? So we talked about reciprocation, commitment, social proof. And what about liking? I mean, it seems obvious, but yeah, we're more likely to say yes to people that we like, or even just find attractive.
It's more powerful than we realize. Cialdini talks about something called the halo effect, where we automatically attribute these positive qualities to attractive people.
Yeah.
Even if those qualities have nothing to do with their looks.
Oh, 100%. It's why companies use celebrities to endorse products all the time.
Right.
It's like our brains go on autopilot. We see someone famous, and suddenly we're more likely to buy that skincare, that car, that whatever they're selling, even if it makes no sense.
Exactly. But attractiveness is, it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
We're also more susceptible to persuasion from people who, we just find likable in general. Makes sense, right?
Yeah, we tend to like people who are similar to us, who share our interests, our values, all that. But how does that play into persuasion?
Well, salespeople are often trained in this technique called mirroring and matching.
Mirroring and matching, what's that?
It's basically where they subtly mimic their customers' behavior, their body language, tone of voice, even their opinions.
Wait, really? They do that on purpose?
Oh, yeah. It's all about building rapport, making the customer feel like, hey, this person gets me.
Wow, that's, I don't know, kind of creepy, right? But also kind of brilliant. I can totally see how it would work.
It's surprisingly effective. So how do we defend ourselves against this weapon of liking? I mean, we can't just turn off our natural tendency to, be drawn to certain people.
That's true. It feels very subconscious.
It is. That's why awareness is key. When you find yourself, maybe overly liking someone who's also, say, making a request, hit that pause button.
Pause button.
Yeah, just mentally. Ask yourself, am I liking the person more than I should given the situation?
Ooh, that's good. So it's about separating the person from the request.
Exactly. Don't let those positive vibes cloud your judgment about the actual offer.
Okay, I'm going to try that. Mental pause button. Don't let emotions cloud your judgment. I like it. All right, let's move on from liking. Let's talk about authority. We're basically taught from childhood to respect authority figures, but how can that deference to authority be, kind of used against us?
We've heard of the Milgram experiment, right?
Yeah, vaguely. It's the one with the electric shocks. I know it's pretty unsettling.
It really is. It showed that people, and this is pretty wild, but people were willing to inflict what they believed were painful electric shocks on another person.
Wait, really? Just because someone told them to?
Yes. Just because a researcher, an authority figure, instructed them to.
And they really thought they were hurting someone.
They did. And here's the disturbing part. Most of them continue to administer those shocks, even when the person who was actually an actor cried out in pain.
That's just, I don't even know what to say to that. So what does that tell us? That we're all just like robots following orders?
Well, not exactly, but it does show the power, the immense power that authority figures hold over our actions, even when those actions conflict with our morals, our better judgment.
So how do we tell the difference between legitimate authority and someone who's just trying to, use that authority to manipulate us? It's not like we can just reject all authority.
Right. It's about being discerning. Cialdini has these two questions he says we should ask ourselves whenever we're dealing with an authority figure. The first one is this person truly an expert?
Okay, so check their credentials. Don't just take their word for it. What's the second question?
Right. Second question. How truthful can we expect this expert to be? Like, are they motivated to give us unbiased information? Or do they stand to gain something from our compliance?
That's a really good point. It's
Yeah.
like, what's their angle?
Exactly. So be wary of any expert who's pushing a specific agenda or just seems way too eager for you to agree with them.
Got it. Think for yourself. Do your research. Okay, I feel like we need to be extra vigilant these days, especially with so much information coming at us from, everywhere. Okay, liking, authority. What about scarcity? That feeling of wanting something more when it's rare, or you think you might miss out on it.
Scarcity, classic tactic. Cialdini says that we naturally perceive scarce things as more valuable, even if they're not actually better than, more available options.
It's that limited time offer tactic. Gets me every time.
Right. Scarcity tactics, they create this sense of urgency and also a sense of competition. Like, oh no, if I don't act now, I'm going to miss out. Think about appliance salespeople.
Oh no, here we go. I already know where you're going with this.
You walk in, you're looking for a specific refrigerator, and then bam, the salesperson's like, oh, that model, it's the last one we have,
Yeah.
and there's a special discount, but only today.
It's like they have a sixth sense for what makes me tick, and suddenly I absolutely need that refrigerator, even if I wasn't sure before.
That's scarcity at work. It triggers that fear of missing out, that FOMO, and that pushes us to make those quick, often irrational decisions. So what's the best defense against that pressure? If I'm feeling that urge to buy just because something's scarce, should I just walk away?
Walking away? Yeah, that's always a good option. Especially if you feel that pressure. But, sometimes it's not that easy.
It's true. Sometimes you're stuck, like when you need a new refrigerator.
Right. The key is to, again, recognize the tactic.
Don't let them see you sweat.
Exactly. Take a step back and say, do I really need this? Or am I just being played?
So it's about shifting your perspective. Instead of, oh no, I need this right now. It's, wait, is this just a clever sales tactic?
You got it. Scarce doesn't always equal better. Sometimes scarce just equals
Well,
scarce.
okay, I get it. Scarcity, it's an all-mind game, pretty much.
Yeah.
But remember, we were talking about psychological reactance.
Right, that whole idea that when someone tries to restrict our choices, we just want to rebel even more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cialdini says this plays a huge role in how we respond to persuasion, even when it's unintentional. Think about censorship.
Censorship. How does that fit in with psychological reactance?
Well, when something is banned or censored, it often becomes way more desirable. Even if it's something we didn't care about before. It's like that saying, forbidden fruit tastes the sweetest.
Oh, totally. There's something about not being allowed to have something that makes you want it even more, like a reverse psychology thing.
Exactly. And this doesn't just apply to physical objects. It could be information, ideas, anything. The more someone tries to control what we see, what we hear, what we do, well, the more we might resist.
So it's not just about those overt buy now tactics. It's about being aware of anytime someone's trying to limit our freedom of choice, our access to information, all of that.
You got it. Be a conscious consumer. Think for yourself.
This has been kind of a lot, in a good way. We've gone from reciprocation to scarcity to psychological reactance, even weasels and turkeys. I feel like I need to go back and reread Cialdini's book, right now.
It's a good one. And every time you reread it, you'll probably notice something new.
Yep.
These tactics, they're everywhere.
Okay, so knowing all this, how do we actually navigate the world without being, completely paranoid?
That's the thing. Cialdini doesn't want us to be distrustful of everyone. He just wants us to be aware of how these principles work so we can decide consciously how we respond.
So it's less about, everyone's out to get me, and more about, okay, I see what you're doing there.
Exactly. Knowledge is power.
So we've got our little toolkit now, our defenses against the weapons of influence. What's something practical we can do, like right now, to resist these tactics?
Well, Cialdini talks about mental reframing. Have you heard of that?
Mental reframing. Rings a bell, but refresh my memory.
So let's say you're at the store and you're hit with that classic scarcity tactic.
Yeah.
The limited time offer.
Been there, my wallet's already out.
Right. So instead of getting swept up in that, oh no, gotta buy it now feeling, try mentally reframing the situation.
Reframing. So instead of limited time offer,
That's
what?
How about pressure tactic?
Pressure tactic. I like it. It's like calling it what it really is, right?
Yeah. You're taking back control of the situation. You're not just reacting emotionally. You're making a deliberate choice.
Mental reframing. It's like giving myself a pep talk in the middle of the grocery aisle. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But what about those times when we don't even realize we're being manipulated? Like, it's all very subtle.
That's where you have to trust your gut. Cialdini talks about this too. If something feels off, too good to be true, if you're feeling pressured, trust that instinct.
It's like they say, if your gut tells you something's wrong, it probably is. So combine that with this knowledge we now have.
And you're a persuasion detecting machine.
I love it. All right. That is it for our deep dive into the psychology of persuasion, everybody. Huge thanks to Robert Cialdini for giving us so much to think about, and to you for, well, listening. We'll catch you next time.